Thank you, Dr. Serafin, for joining us today. We've put together a list of 7 questions that we'd like to ask you about your Catholic heritage. So, if you're ready, may I ask the first one?
Sure, go ahead.
Please tell us a little about your life, when you were born, where you grew up, your school and training, your vocation, your labor, and anything else that could relate to your professional life.
Yeah, that will take, let's see, how many days do we have? I thought about it one time writing down a brief biography for my children. So talk about the old days. I haven't done it yet because it would take so long to do, but I better do it before I die. Well, in any event, I was born in Chicago, city of Chicago, in a neighborhood called Humboldt Park, which is very close to the downtown section of Chicago. But in a very modest neighborhood, multi-ethnicity there, almost any group of people you could imagine were within spitting distance. And my grandparents came to the country from Poland. And my parents were born in the Americas. So I'm a second generation American. We went to school, well, we lived in a little 2-bedroom apartment. It had no central heat. It had two oil stoves, one in the kitchen, one in the living room. It had 2 bedrooms. Very modest. And I used to, when I got older, I used to carry 5-gallon cans of oil up to heat the place. We went to my parents were very devout Catholics, as were all members of our family. And we went to a school, Catholic school, called St. Mark's. It's still there today. At that time it was called the Irish school. There was also a Polish school in the area, and there were other Italian schools, etc. Almost every ethnicity had its own school. There was also a synagogue down the street. I'll tell you a little story about that. I used to walk down that street every once in a while. It was a couple of blocks away from where we lived. And I happened to walk by on the Sabbath one day. And a rabbi came out and he said, "I'll give you a quarter." 25 cents. Well, that was enough to get me into a movie in those days. And he said, "I want you to turn on the lights for us. Because they don't do anything. If they're really strict, they don't want to do any labor, even flipping on a light switch. Can you imagine that?" Anyway, I went to a Catholic school. It was a very good school. The church was in the basement of the school. And the school was above it. We were taught exclusively by nuns. And so they gave us their interpretation of what Catholicism was, aimed at us, at our age levels. I did very well in school. I went on to DePaul Academy, which was also a Catholic high school, around 600 students or so. We had pretty good basketball. In fact, we had very good basketball teams. I think in one year we won the Chicago basketball championship. And in another year we either came close or won the city of Chicago football championship. And those championships were always, at that time, public schools versus Catholic schools. So it was a champion public league, champion Catholic league. And there's another story about this. It's hard to believe today, but the championship, the city championship for football, was held in Soldier Field, where the Bears play football today. At that time, it held 100,000 people, and it was full for the Prep Bowl, absolutely full of people. That's how popular high school football was at that time in Chicago. It's still popular today. Well, that's kind of the environment in which I grew up. DePaul Academy was a very good school, and they took some entrance exams, and I always did well on exams. And they, looking at my let's call it the affinity for study and what I should do. Well, this was in 1952, 51, right around then. They decided I should be an engineer or a scientist. I had no idea what I should be, but I always did well in whatever I studied, didn't matter. And that school at that time actually had separate curricula. They would tailor your curriculum to what they thought you should be doing. And they said, if you don't become an engineer or a scientist, we're not going to have you in this school. I couldn't believe it. That's as firm they were about that. Now that school had brothers, those are Vincentian brothers, teaching, as well as lay people. And I did really well. I ended up, after 4 years, being second in the class. And out of that connection, I was able to get a scholarship to college. Yep.
So even in high school, do you find, looking back, that the classes that you took, the experiences that you had, that God was lining things up for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I learned a lot about math and physics, for sure. I was a smart ass, when it came to liberal arts things. I did very well in Latin, but I took 2 years of French. But I didn't like English because I thought it was too easy. And I was really, it was the wrong thing for me to do, for sure, absolutely. If I could confess to that English teacher when I was a senior English teacher. We were reading a lot of good books, and I could read them, and I could answer all the questions. I never had any problem. He had to give me A's whether he liked to or not. But I told him that I was going to be applying for a degree, or for a scholarship at Foreigner Institute of Technology. And he didn't like me. And I didn't really, I was just, not being nice to him. And so he said, only the best of students get into Fournier. I got in. He didn't think I'd make it, or at least he wanted to be sure to tell me that it was going to be tough.